process, but that's what we got until we can change it, and really it should be changed so that we have a national popular vote and have elections based on that way. That's me. I know that's been the position of the NAACP and many others, but you've got to get 3/4 of the states to approve it, but it's worth the fight. It's worth the fight. So the Electoral College is made up, so Michigan's got its 15, of 538 electors. Okay, so when you take Michigan's 15, and North Carolina's 16, and Pennsylvania, and they all meet, they will, if you total them all up, it's 538 total. If you do the math, and they get together, by the way, on December 17th. That's really when the election. So that's so get together on December 17th to cast their ballots. So really, what you're looking at is who can get to 270. That gets you the majority. 270 electoral votes out of 538. So, and whoever gets that is the winner of the presidential election. Wanted to go into as much detail as possible because I think information is power. And so now, again, I've said it before, the election date is November 5th, 2024, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 a.m. the polls open, polls close at 8 p.m., but not really. What I mean by that is this. Again, Richard and I, can't remember what election it was, but Obama. So the poll, there were the lines after, so that was 2008, right? Yeah. So the lines to vote were around the block for polling place after polling place after polling place after polling place. What happens if you're in line, you get in line got off work, you get in line, and it's 2 minutes to 8, and there's 100 people ahead of you and 100 people behind you in line. The law in Michigan says that if you are in line by 8 o'clock p.m., it doesn't matter if that line is a mile long, you have the right to cast a ballot in the state of Michigan. So, have we seen sometimes in Detroit, in Flint, in other places where you've had individuals that are working the system that don't really know that rule, or they just said, look, it's been a long day, and that I'm just going to stay. Yes, we've seen that. And also what happens is people who think, oh, shoot, I got here too late, it started late, and they might turn around. We don't want people to leave. Part of the NAACP training, walking along the line. You stay where you are, please. And it's cold November 8th often. You stand outside, it's cold. It's not, we're a beautiful day today, but, November 8th or November 5th sometimes is cold. And so you said, please stay in line. You're going to have the right to vote. Might have to do a little bit of jockeying inside that polling location where they'll say, well, we need to wrap up. And if there is not cooperation with that, we're ready to fight that in court. All right, so you have the right to vote so long as you're at your polling location and in line by 8 o'clock. And we prepared the filings for federal court that year. And the rules in federal courts is that before you can file something, you actually have to call the lawyer on the other side and ask their permission. I know that sounds kind of strange, but that is the rule. So you have to ask them for permission. It's not permission to file, but it's asking them whether they consent. Because otherwise, the judge, if they consent, the judge would say, well, I don't even need to hear it. I can just go ahead and write the order. Most times, 99% of the time, they're not going to consent. In this occasion, they did. Because who were we suing? We were suing the city of Detroit. to keep those polling locations open. And the chief lawyer for the city of Detroit, which I was in later years, said, you know what, I don't oppose your motion. I agree with your motion, and the motion that we came up with was to keep the polling locations open and extend voting hours in order to make sure that everyone knew that they could vote and were accommodated for that purpose. That was the relief that we were seeking in federal court. The city's lawyer agreed with that, and so arcane rules of federal courts, but that's how it works. And so the Corporation Council agreed to it. As long as you're in line by 8 o'clock, you can vote. Let everybody know. Polling locations, a lot of times, polling locations get changed sometimes. And so we want you to understand, that you need to do some homework to make sure you know what the polling locations are, because sometimes they'll be changed and you say, oh, I've always voted right here, at this location, at this church or whatever. But sometimes they get changed based on, there are contracts that we enter into with community centers, with churches, with schools, and so sometimes they will change because sometimes they say, well, we don't want to do it anymore. Or we can handle more than just one precinct. You could put all 3 precincts, right here. So the contracts that get entered into between the city, in this case, Detroit, or Grand Rapids or whatever, in those areas that allow for us to kind of commandeer some of their hallways and maybe the gymnasium where you can set up the polling stations, sometimes that changes. Let's make sure we know where to vote. So on your materials that I submitted ahead of time, just make sure, don't wait until the last minute, because that has implications too. If you don't, and you say, well, I'm just going to vote here anyway, that has its own implications. So look on there. It's mvic.sos, which stands for Secretary of State, .state.mi.us, voter index. And there's also a voter hotline, and that's 866-OUR-VOTE, OUR-VOTE. So that's 866-687-8683. Again, that's 866-687-8683. So if you're not sure, be sure. I love what President Obama says. He says, to vote, have a plan. Have a plan to vote. And this is part of the plan. So if you're not going to be an early voter, which I'm going to get to in a minute, and you are planning on going to vote on Election Day, I like going to vote on Election Day, I have to tell you. It's always not convenient for me to do so because on Election Day I'm usually with Richard or some or other lawyers, getting ready and to file pleadings, and we're working all that day, and sometimes there isn't time, so I have to vote by absentee ballot. I actually like voting. I like to go to my polling location. So if you're like me and you say, we encourage as many people as possible to early vote. People that likes to actually put my ballot in the machine, so find out where your polling location is. That's the point. Okay, so let's talk about absentee voting. Absentee voting and early voting. What's the difference? Absentee voting is where you get an absentee ballot in the mail and you put it back in the mail and send it back in. Early voting is where you get that ballot and then you present it to one of the polling locations or a drop box, and I have the location of all those drop boxes. Those are also in your materials. And you can drop it in at certain times prior to the election. Those will all be counted as absentee ballots. So, absentee voting, it's already started. I mean, so the ballots went out on September 21st. That's why they say this election, it's already happening. It's already happening. So it begins September 21. So the deadline to request an absentee ballot from the city clerk by mail, if you want one, is November 1st. So you could still request one. You still have some time to request an absentee ballot by mail. You have until November 1st to request it. Remember what President Obama said. Make a plan. Don't wait until November 1st. But you do have the right to do that on until November 1st. There is a November 4th, 4:00 p.m. deadline to request an absentee ballot from the clerk in person. Okay. So if you requested on that date, where you say, okay, I didn't get mine by mail, I want to go in person. That's November 4th at 4 p.m. But once you do that and they give it to you, you can't leave. Well, you could leave, but you got to vote that ballot right then while you're standing right there. Okay, so don't then take it back and then send it in, because then you're flirting with danger. So you must vote at that time at the clerk's office when you are getting that in-person ballot. The clerk has set up 35 early voting centers. This is one right here at Wayne County Community College. There's 35 across the city of Detroit. I've included those in your materials. I won't. I can quickly go through Kroll Community Center, Rouge Park Golf Course, North Rosedale Park Community House, Greater Grace Temple, Wayne County Community College Northwest, Liberty Temple Baptist Church, Greater Emmanuel Institutional Kojic, Tyndall Recreation Center, Northwest Activity Center, Palmer Park Community Center, Perfecting Church, Faith Temple, Greater St. Paul, Farwell Rec Center, Heilman Recreation Center, Baldock Park, DWSD, that's Detroit Water Department, Eastside Community Customer Care Center, Wayne County Community College Eastern Campus, Considine Center, Greater Christ Baptist Church, Horatio Williams Foundation, Renaissance Baptist Church, Butzel Family Center, Department of Elections on the Boulevard, the Detroit Pistons Performance Center. That's a new one. You know, that place that they just opened up on the Boulevard right by Henry Ford Hospital, where the Pistons built that world-class new training center. That's a new one. Right here, Wayne County Community College downtown campus, Unity Baptist Church, Clark Park, City Clerk's Office at the City County Building. We call it KMAC, the Coleman Young Center. Some of us still say either one, Coleman Young Center or City County Building, but at the clerk's office up on the second floor. Kemeny Rec Center, Davison Service Yard, William Ford Memorial Church, Edison Library, Adams Butzel Recreation Complex, and Christ Temple Baptist Church. Okay, that's a mouthful. All right, so but those are, I just wanted to get it out there so it's on the recording so that the people who, can go back through it, or they can look at the materials that and I've included those materials so that you have them. Those are all places that you can go and say, you know what, I filled out my ballot. I'm not going to wait until November 5th. I'm going to go ahead and hand it to the clerk right there, and you're good. Okay, so we've made voting easier. So we have those 35 centers. And early voting begins October 19th, and it goes through November 3rd, that early voting. We made a change in that I was involved in, and that was a good change in state law. And we now have same-day registration. We've been fighting that battle Well, since the 50s. Because before the 1950s, we did have same-day registration, where you could register and vote on the same day. And so they made all kinds of arguments about why you shouldn't be able to do that. But so before the 1950s, you could do that in Michigan. But until very recently, you could not register on the same day. Now you can register to vote and vote on the same day. We were able to change state law at the clerk's office. Now, this is something we vote, the next issue, something we fought tooth and nail, and that was photo identification. Now, just because I say I don't like it, I want you to know that we have it. You do have to bring a photo ID to the polls. There is an exception to that. Now, when I say we fought it all the way up to the Michigan Supreme Court. We did. And we got a broad coalition day and night for better part of here to get that brief. But the Michigan Supreme Court rejected the argument. Our point is, not everybody's got photo ID. And particularly seniors and people who don't drive. Some of them don't have that ID. They said, well, what if you want to get on a plane? Well, they're not getting on a plane. And it disproportionately impacts people who have, who are people of color and people who are of low incomes, So that's just the fact. And we put all of the data, and you would be shocked, maybe you wouldn't be shocked, about the number in this state who don't have photo ID. It's about 500,000. It's north of 500,000. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. And so, but we have this photo ID requirement in Michigan. What is photo ID? What will they take? So one is, what I've got is you can have your driver's license. Of course, they'll take that, and generally you'll see them swipe it on the on their entry pad, because then that also corresponds to the big statewide list that they have in Lansing under the Secretary of State called the Qualified Voter File. So that just kind of matches you up with the big vote registry in Lansing that matches your name to the name that's on file in Lansing. Okay, so driver's license, Michigan personal ID card, a government-issued ID, as long as it's got a picture on it, a passport, a military ID, student ID from an educational institution, or a tribal ID, if you're a member of one of the Native American tribes. Now, what happens if you don't have any of those? Which is the case. I told you. Some north of 500,000 citizens in this state don't have that. What if you are still registered to vote but don't have any of those things that I just talked about in a minute? You can still vote if you tell those at the clerk's office when you come in to vote, I don't have that, I would still like to vote. Then what will they do? They'll flip your original voter slip over, and on the back side is a place for you to sign your name and date it. And what you're signing is an affidavit saying I don't have those forms of ID. So that was what we were able to do. You're still able to vote if you don't have ID. And we've tested that, by the way, to see if people, over the years, people, are not letting people know that. Sometimes, we've had some issues, but right now, just know that if you have no ID, you are still able to vote so long as you sign an affidavit, which is a sworn statement under, penalty of perjury, that in fact, you don't have any of those forms of ID. Okay, let's go over the ballot. So this is the official ballot in the city of Detroit. It's a sample ballot. And Dan Baxter, who's the director of elections, gave it to me. So it's just it's not a real ballot. It's a sample ballot. Our ballot is not as long as it's been in years past. I've seen ballots that are, you know, folded up here, and if you unfold it, it goes all the way down to the floor. I've seen that before, you know, and that's it's a problem, because what happens? Vote for the top 5 things that you know about, and then you say, you know, I don't want to, you know, finish it all, and then you leave. It's not good. We want you to vote the whole ballot. I remember when a friend of ours was running for the Michigan Supreme Court, and yes, we are one of the states that do elect members of the Supreme Court, but the elections for the judges are way down at the end, and we wanted to make sure that particularly you know, that we had voted all the way through the ballot. And so you all know his name. He's now the corporation counsel for the city of Detroit, but at one point he was Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court, Conrad Mallett. So I remember we sat in a room and we were thinking, what would be a good thing to help people remember that we want them to vote the whole ballot. So somebody, I didn't come up with this, but a friend of ours in the room said, you haven't finished your ballot till you voted for Mallett. It worked. Right? It worked. And so it's those positions at those proposals at the end, and the judicial positions at the end, those are just vitally important. You know, we have a Supreme Court that's divided 4-3, and it is just vital. So you have a partisan section of the ballot. Partisan meaning Democrat or Republican. Nonpartisan means, you know, like for example, the mayor's office is nonpartisan. There's not Democrat or Republican, as it is in some other cases. In New York City, it's different, you know, where the mayor runs as a Democrat or as a Republican. And here, it's not partisan. But you start with the partisan ballot, and the first thing is you're able to vote a straight party ticket. What does that mean? That means that if you say, well, I'm a Democrat, and I'm going to vote for all the Democrats. I'm not going to go through each one. You can just fill in the oval, and you'll see there are ovals next to each one of the candidates. Very important that you fill in that oval. They'll give you a pen, you know, there. You've got to fill in that oval, and that, you know, then that ballot gets put into a sleeve, into a machine. If you don't fill it in the whole way, it has implications. It could be there's a recount later, which I have done many recounts. There's a chart to see, do we reject this they only fill in half of that. Do they really mean to vote, or they just put a dot in the middle? Or I've seen where they put an X in the middle of the oval. I've seen where they put a check mark in the middle of the oval. I've seen stray marks. And so, because we're what's called a voter intent state, if there's a recount and we're not sure, and they've laid out all the ballots, and you're trying to figure it out, and people have to make a determined yes or no, did they really intend to vote for that person? We don't want to have that. We don't want to have that issue. Fill in the whole oval. Fill in the whole oval. If you want to vote straight Democratic Party, you can vote right in this top oval right here, in top left, Democratic Party, and then you're good. You don't have to vote for any other of the partisan tickets. You could do the same thing for Republicans if you are a Republican. NAACP is a nonpartisan 501c4, and so you know, we don't endorse candidates per se. So can fill in one of those parties. Okay. Now let's get to this is a presidential election year. So you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 choices. 8 choices for president and vice president of the United States. In 2016, Hillary Clinton lost the state of Michigan by less than 10,000 votes. That same year, Jill Stein, who was one of the third-party candidates that's on the ballot again this year, got more than 10,000 votes. My personal position, I'm not saying this is the position of the NAACP, my personal position is that these third-party candidates are spoilers. They're only there for a spoiling purpose. That's Butch Hollowell's position. I am not voicing the position of the NAACP or any other organization. But when you look at some of those others that are on there, and I say shame on them, on some of them for being on there, and you say, well, I'm not, to me it's throwing away a vote. Throwing away a vote. And so I'm not here to tell anybody who to vote for or who not to vote for. All I'm saying is that this, you're going to see an editorial from me in the Michigan Chronicle and the African American newspapers around the state in the next few days, which talks about this issue at length. And so I've talked about why that is a disservice to I think this election. That's Butch Hollowell's position. That is not the NAACP's position, but that's my position. Okay, so you're going to have some other choices. You're going to have 8 total choices. So look at that, and if you see the one that's not one of these third parties, then I think otherwise it's a wasted vote. We have a U.S. Senate race that's going on in this state. Very important. Right now, Democrats control the U.S. Senate, 51-49. 51-49, and we know that the Democratic Party faces headwinds in connection with that. There was a conservative Democrat, Joe Manchin, in West Virginia. He's not running again. That's a heavily Republican state, and that Republican is favored heavily to win. We've got another conservative Democrat, but reliable Democrat, John Tester, in Montana. He's running 5 points behind in his state. That could flip the U.S. Senate. Those 2 races alone. Now, Ohio, which used to be a swing state like Michigan, is no longer really a swing state. It's considered a pretty reliable red state for all of its statewide officials, except for one, Sherrod Brown, U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown. And he's popular and will probably win re-election in Ohio, even though he's a Democrat. And he's a very, very pro-union, very pro-worker Democrat in that state. So he's really been the only one. Nevada, I think, and New Mexico are looking like Democrats will hold on to those seats. It looks like Democrats will win by a comfortable margin the U.S. Senate seat in Arizona. And the election denier Carrie Lake is running 5 to 6 points behind, that's a very significant number. So given all that, we have 2 choices here in Michigan. Alyssa Slotkin, who's the Democrat, or Mike Rogers, who's the Republican. Then they go to the congressional races. You're not going to see anybody on there because no one filed on the Republican side for our Then we get to representatives in the state legislature, and then we get to the state boards. So we elect our state board of education in Michigan. So you'll have the opportunity to vote there. We elect our University of Michigan, Wayne State University, and Michigan and Wayne State University are actually in the Michigan Constitution. A lot of people don't know that. We're one of the very few states that gives those three educational institutions certain constitutional protections. Very few states have done that, but they are there, and we elect those members. What happens if you're like Northern Michigan University or Central Michigan University? There, that's a separate thing where the governor appoints to those boards. But for the University of Michigan Board of Regents, Michigan State University Board of Trustees, and the Wayne State University Board of Governors, you'll be able to cast ballots for that. Prosecuting attorney, and we do elect prosecutors as partisan, Democrat versus Republican. Kim Worthy is the Democrat versus, I can't even read the other person's. And that person is running as a libertarian, so I don't even think there was a Republican that made the ballot. Same thing with sheriff, county clerk is up, the county treasurer's up, the register of deeds, where you figure out who owns what in the city, and then the county commissioners for your district. The nonpartisan. Okay, so now you have talked about Justice Mallet. We have two choices, that are up for the Michigan Justice of the Supreme Court. You'll be able to tell who is an incumbent and who is not an incumbent in the Supreme Court. Okay, so please, please, please stick with this ballot. Stick with it. I can't tell you how important having our votes counted for the Supreme Court races in particular. It's just vital. Right now, those members of the Supreme Court are nominated at the Democratic and Republican benches. And so, do your research on that, but we have to make sure we cast our ballots there. Then the Court of Appeals, Circuit Court, which in our case is the Wayne County Circuit Court, and then get to probate court and 30